In this episode, I take Rachel and you into the underhand tactics going on right under our noses from the commercial milk formula industry, also known as CMF. In February 2023, the Lancet and the World Health Organization released a new 3-part series discussing the marketing of commercial milk formula. Rachel really did wonder if this would be of any interest to our listeners, and I promised her that within a few minutes her knickers would be in a twist. And you'll soon see that they were. This is not a discussion about whether formula milk should be used. This is a look at the often horrifying goings-on that are in a large part leading to women all over the globe feeling robbed of their breastfeeding wishes and experiences. In this episode, you will hear about who first patented, can't say that word, infant formula and why, how we are all being subversively targeted with underhand tactics, how the CMF industry raises profits by casting doubt on mother's milk and pathologizing normal baby behaviours, like how often should babies feed, or how much crying is okay. We look at how much the CMF industry is worth, and we discuss whether there is a difference between a tin of formula which costs 9 or one that costs 28, insert your own currency here, and whether there is a true need for toddler milk and growing up milks. We look at political lobbying from the industry, and we also look at that in comparison with the unpaid work of breastfeeding and its estimated cost for society. And we leave you with some what to do's. So, as always, put on the kettle. You might need a gin for this one, to be honest. Put on your walking shoes, but maybe you need to run because you're in for a treat. I'm Katie James, and this is the Midwives Cauldron podcast. Each episode, I'm joined by my incredible co-host, Dr. Rachel Reed. Listen in as we hubble, bubble, toil and trouble our way through aspects of womanhood, midwifery, birth and lactation. But just a sec, before we start on this epic episode, if you love the show and want more from Rachel and me, then head on over to our websites and check out all the courses, books, collectives a go-go. You'll find all the details and occasional discount deals on the old Instagram at the Midwives Cauldron, or, of course, in the show notes below. And if you really, really love the show, please consider 2 things: a single or a monthly donation over on Patreon, or even buy me a coffee. And remember, that review you leave on your podcast host really makes a difference in who listens in. Thank you for your support. We just love having you bubbling away with us. I've got to.
Well, you chose the topic.
I know, because
I don't even know what it is.
It needs to be fucking talked about, innit? So we are basically talking about.
So what you put here is the Lancet CMF podcast recording. Like,
Yeah.
What is CMF?
Commercial milk formula.
It's not helpful.
Commercial milk formula. So today, Rachel, we are basically talking about exploitation, underhand practices, and political involvement in terms of how we are affecting breastfeeding and the damage and harm we are doing. So prepare to get your knickers in a twist, because this needs to be discussed.
Great.
Yeah. Brilliant. So yes, that's what we're talking about today.
All right. So, and this is going to be of interest to the audience.
It has to be, whether they like it or not. So you're going to be on the edge of your seat.
So what are you getting?
What am I getting? They're going to get a chocolate frog if they listen to all the way through. Now, this is tricky because it can feel like, oh my God, I can't believe we're discussing this. But I promise you, this is like a movie title of intrigue, and it will make your hair stand on end what is going on. So I need to talk about this because most people are not going to go out and read a 3-page three paper series, I should say, on breastfeeding and commercial milk formula, so infant formula.
So is this in the Lancet? Are you going to link to the 3 papers?
Of course, I'll link to it. Absolutely, and it's open.
Are we discussing them all?
We are going to briefly touch on some of the main points. We are not discussing it all because we will be here for about 14 hours, and we're not. So this is basically third in the breastfeeding series. Is that a word? Series that have been released from the Lancet that are working with WHO on breastfeeding. There was one in 2016, and then there was something last year, but just in February, they have just released this new 3-part series, which is looking at the commercial marketing of formula milk. So we are not discussing whether someone should formula feed, the needs, the uses, that there is a need. We are discussing the practices which are going on, which have played a major role in terms of how women are breastfeeding, environmental damage, looking at GDP and political lobbying. So this is why
this has been going on for bloody years. Can you remember when we were in the community, the midwives had books that had covers by Colgate?
Yeah, totally.
It is Colgate, isn't it? Or do they make toothpaste? Hang on.
No, that's a toothpaste, but it's good that you've named a toothpaste, because then we can just it was definitely a toothpaste.
Not say the
label. No, it's fine. That's why I've got my notes. I am
my brain is really
the Lancet, so we have no legal issues going on here.
Okay.
But yes, it was, we would have lanyards, we'd have tape measures with formula companies, we'd have baby, whatever, all sorts of things.
The due date wheels so that women would look at them.
Yes. I mean, in certain countries, the doctors will have prescription pads with the formula, specialized formula, which we'll come on to. So I'm going to do a whirlwind tour of this because it is in depth. I am using notes. I'm going to take some quotes, but there are some facts which, when I watched the webinar that was reporting on the documents and then read them, I literally gasped out loud. And I'm aware of this stuff as a lactation consultant. So I need to bring this to midwives and doulas because it's so subliminal that we're not fully aware of where we're being targeted and what's going on. And I just think, do you know what? I'm going to raise this issue. We talk about the problems with maternity services, and it can be a really tricky one when we talk about formula feeding. And I'm not talking about formula feeding and the individual. I'm talking about big commercial milk. It's a bit like talking about big pharma. This is what this discussion is. And this is why I'm having it.
It's exactly like that.
It is. So I've got my big girl pants on and I'm fighting like a girl today.
A woman.
Good. First page done. You're fine. It's going to be a lot of editing on this. There was 3
but isn't there legal controls of this stuff? Like, because you're right, like we then weren't allowed to do.
Wait, you've skipped questions. I need to get to that point. Hold on.
Aren't there already legal?
No, it's okay. Where does this start? Because I want to tell you about German chemist.
Oh my God, we're going all the way back to the top then. Okay, well, where does this start?
Wait, say that again. Stop it. Okay, fuck it. I'm just going with this now. I'm not even cutting this.
Okay.
I'm not cutting this.
Where does this start?
Right. All right. I wanted to just go back to the beginning very briefly. There was a German chemist, and his name is Justus von Liebig. Hopefully, I have pronounced that right.
Chemist.
He was Mr. Chemist. He patented the first infant formula, and it has been called breast milk substitutes for a long time, and the name has now been officially changed in the Lancet to commercial milk formula. And so he patented commercial milk formula back in 1865. And this was a time when breastfeeding and infant health was really being threatened because industrialization was occurring. Lots of women were having to go to work in the workhouses. There was this like dissemination of social support even back then. And what was the other thing that was really occurring then that we talk about constantly? The medicalization of childbirth. and infant care, and all these great books that came out from male pediatricians and obstetricians telling us how we should control our bodies and control our babies. So this is actually all the way back there. We start seeing targeted advertising to mothers and the recruitment of doctors and scientists, because even then, formula companies were marketing their materials to cast doubt on the quality of mother's milk and claiming to provide perfectly medically endorsed solution closest to mother's milk. I mean, we've all probably seen the old Nestle adverts from the 1900s that are just, they're almost laughable, because you can't imagine that was allowed. I will put some up on the Instagram if you've never seen them, or just Google, because there is a plethora. So yes, you can ask your next question now, but I just wanted to tell the story of that we've gone back to 1865. This is where it comes from.
Okay, and so since then, have there been laws enacted to stop all of that?
Yes, but basically the current sort of legal regulatory standards about marketing are underpowered and underused to counter the sheer power of this industry of commercial marketing formula. So yes, there is a WHO code on breast milk substitutes. And yes, there has been interventions, that's not the word, looking at Jesus. I'm just going to say that. Yes, there is a code.
Not looking at Jesus.
He wasn't much help, was he? And so
I bet he was breastfed.
I bet he was. It wasn't 1865, so you know. So basically, there is a huge amount of power. So can you guess how much this industry is worth, Rachel? Just commercial formula. And this is actually a stat from 2019.
Oh my God. Is it? Well, it'll be less than the pharmaceutical industry as a whole.
Yes, of course.
God, I don't know. I'm useless at numbers.
Yeah, no. And it's
millions.
A big one. 55 billion per year.
Oh my God.
So with that money,
is that more than Facebook makes? Like, all the Silicon Valley.
Oh my God, how are you asking me a stat like that? Like, I researched all of this and then I went, do you know what? I'll just compare that to what Facebook makes, Mr. Mark Zuckerberg.
Because they make loads of money. So when you think about billions, you think about like whoever those guys
Mr.
are who
Tesla,
run the internet things. Yeah, those ones, Mr.
One
Facebook,
of them famous TikTok persons.
Who've now become the metaphysicals or something, haven't they? Anyway, they're worth billions. I'm just trying to...
Facebook Meta, not metaphysicals.
Yeah.
Maybe that's where it's from. I mean, it is from that, isn't it? Let's not go off, because I'm just looking really...
No, let's not. Now. So the formula companies make a lot of money, maybe as much as them or more.
Also, what happens...
This is going to be depressing.
This is really depressing. I'm really sorry, but it is. But it needs to be known, and you need to get angry. As my lovely Scottish friend with also my name says, and I love this quote, I've used it for so many years, have you got sand in your vagina? And I'm like, yes, I've got freaking sand in my vagina now. I am irritated as beep. So what also goes on, because when you've got a lot of money and a lot of power, you want political power. And you also want to make more money. Clearly, we do. We all do, apparently. And so according to the Lancet series, so I am quoting them, since the early 1990s, the commercial milk formula industry has increased their profits by reducing its income tax payments to governments. So it's reduced its tax payments. So what this does...
Well, how are you allowed to do that?
Exactly.
I'd like to do that.
So would we all. It'd be lovely, wouldn't it? And get away with it and just continue to get away with it. But what this does, obviously, is it reduces the abilities of governments to not only address what's going on from the commercial milk formula industry in terms of the harms that they do, but it also reduces the ability of that country to deliver essential public services, such as including paid maternity protection, breastfeeding protection, promotion, and support. So in terms of those services that are paid for by tax, the commercial milk formula reduces what's going in. And if you're thinking $55 billion per year industry, that's a lot of tax that they are able to evade. And of course, they're paying some tax, but we have an issue here.
All right, so back to the papers. What were the main themes coming out of the series?
Okay, so the first paper really talks about exploiting mothers' insecurities. So what they state is these companies have been using underhand marketing strategies designed to prey on and exploit mothers' insecurities about their milk and their ability to satisfy and calm their baby. There has been years of pathologizing normal infant behaviors to sell their products. So basically, they're positioning normal crying, normal fussing, normal sleep patterns in breastfeeding babies as abnormal. And this was a quote that was in the webinar from one of the authors. And they reported that one formula company exec was known to say that they are selling peace of mind. That's what they sell to their company. Yep, penny drop. This is why I need to talk about this, because we don't talk about it, and we talk about it and we have anger and we have hurt, and we have so many women who feel so distressed that they weren't able to feed their baby, or they chose not to, and there's all this guilt and anger, and we just can't have a conversation. And we need to be saying,
well, the focus of the conversation is on individuals, isn't it? It's what women are choosing to do, not looking above that and going, what are the influences that are coercing women into particular choices, blocking them from other choices? It's kind of looking up the chain, isn't it? Instead of blaming women.
Yes, exactly that. Like, you know, you've heard of those special formulas which will say, stop the baby, you know, help your baby with colic. Your baby will get more sleep. These claims are scientifically unsubstantiated. They shouldn't be allowed to say it. They have comfort milks on the market. They contain all sorts of things like prebiotics, hydrolyzed proteins, xanthan gum, low lactose. But again, there's no clinical trials to back these claims that they provide relief for infant discomfort. So we are pathologizing. We are pushing this message by showing that, look, your baby's calmer on this than these abnormal behaviors that actually are totally normal, but we've just lost this ability to see other babies, to trust ourselves, and that is not the individual. These companies also make a massive amount of unsubstantiated claims and inferring that the formula can enhance brain development and improve intelligence.
Yeah, I've seen those.
Yeah, and you'll get babies wearing glasses, like on the tins. Not so much in countries like Australia, the UK, but particularly in sort of Southeast Asia and countries where the code really isn't as strongly implemented, or they can get away with it. I mean, you just have to Google and you will see a whole host of imaging that is so subliminal. So we have a real problem. And, you know, these quotes or these claims tend to be in large writing on the packages as well. So they are capitalizing on women's insecurities, on parents' insecurities, on families' insecurities, because it's not just the mother, the parents, it's often the grandparents, the surrounding family who will then have been brought into this whole sort of language and then, you know, keep it going, because that's what we're led to believe over the years. And their targeting, their marketing is designed to solve the problem. the problem of normality. And,
which isn't a problem.
It isn't a problem. And of course, when you sell peace of mind, holy moly, is that a fantastic thing to sell? Because who doesn't want that in those early days and weeks and months when you're every day it changes and you go, oh my God, who let me loose with this baby? Like, holy moly, I'm not qualified. Where's the manual? Where's the instruction manual? And then you see that. So it's not surprising when I tell you that fewer than half of infants and young children globally are not breastfed as per the WHO recommendations.
Hang on. Half are not breastfed as per recommendations.
Correct.
Globally.
So that takes into account low, middle income and high income countries. However, we don't have as good data about breastfeeding rates in high income countries. Even though we have technology.
It would be worse.
Yeah. And so when we look at the amount of infants that are we talked about this, and I'm not going to go over it because we talked about it in the episode, like the top up crap trap, which you called or something. I'm trying to remember what you called it. Crap trap. We talked about like giving in these feeds, but in the first 48 hours, like there's really good data looking at that in lower middle income countries. However, I talked about the research and how vast it was in terms of, it's maybe 10%. Actually, maybe it's about a third of all babies are being given a supplementary feed, non-medically indicated. And we know that there's implications to that even in the first 48 hours. So this is happening globally. And so you probably want to ask me a question about safety. It's one of these classic episodes.
Maybe I don't.
Okay, then we'll skim on that. No one wants to know about safety practices, do they? Boring. Really boring.
Well, no, because, with pharmaceutical things, medications, what are they?
That's the word.
Yeah.
You're on track.
Well, then I was going to say there are safety things, but they're actually not, like, let's not head down that track. So for infant formula, well, actually, I'm saying, there's safety standards, but when I think, because I'm not really in my world, I don't come across it a lot.
Yeah.
When I do, it's usually some drama about a safety issue. A can's got, I don't know, something and it shouldn't have in. They're pulling them off the shelves and everybody's freaking out. Or there's a shortage. Those are the two kind of news things that make it into my world about formula. So there must be safety standards, are there?
Of course, yes. Particularly in, European countries, UK, Australia, we have regulations. They have to meet certain safety standards. It is classed as a food. So therefore, it comes under that to be able to be sold on the market. And I'm not going to talk about the recalls here. That's a whole nother podcast of what goes on with that. Like, what I'm talking about is that there is, if you go and look in a supermarket, whatever country you're in now, and you look at first milks, now follow-on milks, and recently on the market, like toddler milks as well. And then all of them will have like these claims of different ingredients. It is overwhelming. And then, comparing Aldi's brand, because in some countries Aldi have their own brand, to the toothpaste named brand on the market, or to the other one that's organic and goat's milk and blah 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 blah. That's what I want to talk about.
But you're told not to put your baby straight onto cow's milk. So I think a lot of people then go, okay, well, if I've got a toddler that's going to have milk, I'm going to put them onto this formula, thinking they still need milk other than breast milk.
Yes. So if you cannot breastfeed, or for a medical reason, or you choose to formula feed, whatever the reason, that's not the point here. The point is that it is so confusing and there is so many options and the price points are massively different. You can have like $10 difference between, this formula from this company and this formula from that company. And actually, these additional ingredients or different formulations, basically, they are not agreed. They have not agreed in the scientific literature to offer any extra benefit It simply makes the products more expensive for parents.
So it's part of branding.
So this is marketing. Absolutely. So it's claims that are unsubstantiated, but then making you pay the difference between, say, $9 for a tin or $30 for a tin. But it's actually, they are all meet the regulatory standards for safe food, and they haven't been proven in good quality studies. So the best resource, let's get down to the nitty gritty. Like if you are, whoever you are listening to this, it doesn't matter. Please go to First Steps Nutrition. It is a UK-based organization. It is incredibly awesome. They have all of the most up-to-date information for new families, for health professionals. You can choose to read whichever one you want because it's bloody awesome information, and it's comprehensive and it's easy to read. Probably not when you're day about 3 formula. Postpartum, though, about formula milks. So I did mention follow-on milks and toddler or growing up milks, as they're called.
Mm-hmm.
These don't actually have any recommendations. You just mentioned that babies, basically until they're 1 year old, they're not recommended to have full fat cow's milk. But from 1 year old, full fat cow's milk has, at this point in time, the research supports that it has the nutrients, the vitamins, everything they need if they are not being breastfed. I hesitate to say. The recommendation is if you can, if you have the support, if you want to, XYZ, the World Health the WHO recommends that you breastfeed and keep it in the diet for 2 years and beyond. But if that's not in the diet, cow's milk does the job. So we have a huge amount of milks being sold that are superfluous to society and not needed.
That's why they've got billions.
That's why they've got billions in it. And the other thing is environmental burden. So these are substantial. And what the paper points out, which I think is important, is that the environmental burden of commercial milk formulas far exceeds those associated with the moderate increases in the caloric and water needs of breastfeeding mothers. So I love that the fact that they had to put this in, like as if women eating, and it's about an extra 500 calories. But, you know, even if some women go, you know, I'm hungry today, I'm going to eat and treat myself to 1,000 calories a day. And the extra water needs, how that could compare to the fact that we're stripping the rainforest for cows to make milk, and then we're making packaging and plastic lining and tins and XYZ.
You're flying all over the world.
Yeah, the greenhouse gas emissions, water use, pollution, packaging waste. But what's interesting and why I wanted to link this back to the follow-up formulas and the toddler milks, which I just said were superfluous. I got that word from the Lancet, actually, because it's a good word, is that the milks in 2020, the total amount of milks that were sold, 69% of them were follow-on formulas and these toddler milks. This was of total powdered milk sold. Yes. I was really gobsmacked to read this. So that equates...
So basically, most of the sales are for milk that's not needed. Because you do need formula if you're not breastfeeding a little baby.
Yes.
But most of their sales are not babies that need to have formula.
Yes. So this is unnecessary use of natural resources that literally is unnecessary. We just don't need it. It is purely for profits. Okay, what I think is important to say about this is just that the WHO actually employed the services of M&C Saatchi World Services to look into the marketing tactics. Yes. So it's like fighting equally, which I was like, ooh, you got the big guns out. Like, if you haven't heard of Saatchi as a advertising agency, then get out from your rock, because they've done the campaigns.
Even I've heard of them.
Even Rachel's heard of them, and she's in the forest. And what I really want to talk about is the amount of money that is actually spent per year on marketing. So can you guess that? So if we're taking a $55 billion company, what percentage do you think they spend on marketing? Or what?
Well, they've got so much money they could spend most of it on. Like,
Yeah, they could.
I don't know, 60%.
No, it's a little bit out now. My number's going to sound less shocking. I shouldn't have asked you.
But they've got so much money they can spend as much as they want.
Yeah, but they also have to manufacture. And anyway, there is actually quite a sliding scale. But the average, so the sliding scale goes up to quite a large amount, but the average is 6% of total turnover. But when you put that down, that's 3 billion per year spent on just advertising, just the advertising. Can you compare that to public health services? What do you think the NHS spends on marketing? And then when we just use the phrases, £10 per year. No, it's a little bit more.
Yeah.
And we are getting better. But also we started off like back in the 90s with all of the Breast is Best campaign, which didn't help us. It just aggravated, upset and annoyed women and people supporting in these roles because for a multitude of reasons. But basically what we can see from marketing is that as the sales of formula milk in a country increase, this is directly related to the decreased rates of breastfeeding at 12 months. I mean, that's not shocking, but it's there.
So there's evidence it's having an effect. So it's not, because people often say, oh, it doesn't matter, if you have a pen that's got Colgate on it and whatever. But they wouldn't give you the pen if it didn't work. They wouldn't do the marketing if it didn't work.
Correct. Exactly that. So it's, as the Lancet states, it's multifaceted. It's very well resourced. It has an influence all over, from new parents, the doctors, the pharmacies, to policy, to legislation, and even politics itself. And this is where I want to just talk briefly about political lobbying. So,
God, that's a boring topic. You're going to have to make that interesting.
I'm making it interesting. I'm quoting now. The ability of the commercial milk formula. Oh, Jesus. The ability of CMF, corporations to expand and sustain their marketing practices worldwide is only possible because of their large investments in corporate political activities. Between 2007 and 2018, the big six manufacturers spent $184 million on lobbying the US government to oppose marketing regulations in Hong Kong, Thailand, Malaysia, Indonesia, and in the World Trade Organization, and through direct bilateral engagements with governments seeking to implement national breastfeeding protection laws. So they actively lobbied against the protection, promotion, and support of breastfeeding because this harms their business. So this is why I need to talk about this issue. I've got goosebumps now, like that we know these underhand practices go on in big pharma, and yet we don't talk about it about big formula. And the lobbyists use these types of claims that their industry contributes investment to jobs and growth for national economies. However,
but they don't pay tax.
Not only that, this is where your knickers might just twist a bit more. Not breastfeeding contributes to an estimated economic losses of $341 billion US. That's 0.7% of the world's gross national income. This is annually. So this is from increased health costs, reduced workforce productivity associated with not breastfeeding. However, let me go on. Yet, these corporations are not being held financially accountable for the harms they are creating. Our society and the individual country pays for their own increased costs caused by the use of formula milk. or the lack of breastfeeding provision. And that's the rub. And so basically, breastfeeding is archetypal of care work. 76% of unpaid care work is performed by women. Data from 64 countries. And
that's why it's unpaid.
Correct. And so women's unpaid care work in households is currently unmeasured, unrecognized, and unvalued in global economic institutions. So they're quoting the Lancet, not recognizing this work in economic statistics generates gender inequity and distorts fiscal priorities and has been condemned by feminist economists as applied patriarchy. Unpaid work is equivalent to 10 to 40% of the GDP globally. And unpaid care work remains mostly invisible, unrecognized, and unaccounted for in decision-making politically. So, for example, the Lancet stated that the value of milk produced by breastfeeding women globally, $3.6 trillion. Yes.
Wow.
Yeah.
3.6 That's even bigger than billion.
It's bigger than a billion. It's bigger than all big pharma, I would think. It's probably big pharma, actually, but numbers. However, is breastfeeding counted for in the GDP of countries? Of course not.
No.
But the infant formula milk shares are counted for in the GDP of the country.
Got sand in my vagina.
True capitalism. Profits over people. And I'm quoting a wonderful doctor who spoke at the webinar called Dr. Goody Singh. And I loved it when she said that. She didn't say sand in your vagina. She just said it's true capitalism. Oh. I would have loved that even better if she'd gone, I've got sand in my vagina. We have a major problem.
All right. So let's leave on a bit of a high note. What can we do about this?
Okay. Thankfully, we can do stuff. And I'm going to get that sand from your vagina. And I'm going to pull it out without doing a vaginal examination.
Or a douche, because they're not good for you.
Oh, no, not one of those. Okay. Right. What can we do about this? If you have time, and I know a lot of people don't really, so that's why I had to do this in a podcast, watch or read the Lancet series. Write to your local MP. And there was an MP who was on the webinar, and I loved what she said. It was brilliant. She said, write to them several times. Your email will get lost in their inbox. Don't let your email get lost. I think that's a good thing for all of us to be aware of. And she was like, pester them.
What are we going to say?
What are we going to say?
What are you writing?
We're going to say that we need to tighten the laws. We need to have a proper look at the inequities of what is happening between commercial milk formula. We want you to read the Lancet breastfeeding series because it is all written there in terms of they've done the work for us. Please read this. And you could
give them a link.
You can send them the link.
Highlight the key things.
Correct. And there is a summary.
Right.
There's a webinar. There's even like an 11-minute YouTube clip that has people summarizing. Send them that. But keep sending it to them. So what else can you do? This came up, and we haven't talked about it a lot, but it was in the paper in terms of looking at the way we've masked these normal behaviors of infants. And what we need to be doing is giving realistic expectations to new mothers and parents on normal newborn behaviors like sleep and crying, because it's particularly these areas where we have a huge influx of going to the GP, emergency admissions, colic, this is that, and then people clearly trying to solve a problem that actually isn't even being solved by introducing the formula, and often makes the problem worse. We need to train our healthcare staff well in these areas. It's unfair not to. It's unfair to be floundering around not without the answers. That's a horrible place to be faced with, is this normal sleep pattern? And you're so discombobulated and confounded by mixed messaging, and you've never been given this training. I mean, as midwives, we really weren't given good information about infant sleep in those first few weeks. So these things need to be...
I've thought of a solution.
Great.
We could also talk to parents about it before the baby comes as part of antenatal education, just so they understand how CMF, because I can't remember the full name of it again, how that operates, so that they're at least a bit more aware of the influences and the marketing.
We need to do this in the right way. And that's where I think it's become tricky, is to having this conversation without there being a trigger point, a reaction to... I don't even know how to talk about it, because there is so much... It's deep sadness and anger. I mean, let's go back and listen to the Amy Brown episode, if you haven't, about what is taken from women. And no wonder we have this anger and this reaction to go, we feel so blamed that we couldn't breastfeed or we weren't able to. Actually, that's my last point, which I'm going to say now, because this is a political issue. Breastfeeding is not the sole responsibility of the mother. When you have all of this subversive information that has been there since 1865, we need to take the blame away so that we can open up the conversation. And that's a really important part. But we need to be talking about this antenatally. And it's also tricky because we have guidelines about not talking about formula and not talking about... And that I find really tricky to navigate. So we need to be having this as a conversation. And that's why I want to open it up here. So that midwives particularly start this conversation, because they have influence, they have power in terms of the positions that they're sitting in within their hospital structure, within their working groups, with neonatologists, with obstetricians, with the financial departments of the hospital. And if that conversation can start being had without emotion, in terms of other than being fucking pissed off and angry that this is being done to women and families, being done to us as health professionals, then we can open the conversation. But when the conversation is very much a place of hurt and anger and fear, there is no conversation. And that's why this isn't happening. This is why we haven't really talked about this before. I want people, anyone working in this business, please stay up to date on formula milks, or when you're asked the question, just immediately refer to First Steps Nutrition. Don't let someone go off and Google. Because if you start Googling anyway, First Steps Nutrition is not going to be the first one that comes up, because they don't have as much money. So you're going to get a formula company probably, and then your brain's warped. Or you're going to get a .com that I read something the other day. I couldn't believe what I was reading. And it's apparently a health website. So go to First Steps Nutrition, download their PDF, update yourself every year, and just have it. It's free. Also, if you think there's a breastfeeding issue, whether you're supporting someone or you're dealing with it, seek help from a qualified person. We know that most GPs, most doctors do not have qualifications to deal with lactation and breastfeeding issues. So seek help from the right person, so that you're not told, oh, I'm not sure your milk's good enough, and all this bullshit we've been hearing for years. Also, go back and listen to the episode on the crap trap top up. Navigating the top-up conundrums. I'm not sure what I called it. I'll link to it in the show notes. And I think, lastly, remember, the formula milk companies are exploiting mothers and parents and families' emotions. They are manipulating scientific information to generate sales at the expense of the health and the rights of families, women, and children. And that's what this conversation is about.
Yeah.
Thank you. So are you glad that I made you listen to a 3-part series on the Lancet and the WHO now?
Yes, like, as usual, I learned a lot, because it's something I would not have gone and looked at myself. But it's really important.
Yeah, it is. Okay. So I suppose that's where we sign off.
Thank you for educating me.
I'm always happy to educate you, darling. Thank you for listening, and thank you for being here today for this edumacating topic.
Gotta go and wash the sand out my vag now.
That's what I'm going to do. Going straight in the shower. See you later.
See ya.
I hope you found a few golden nuggety nuggets in the show today. Please don't press pause, but instead scroll on down on your podcast app. Yep, that's it, down there, and pop a review and maybe a few stars to make our eyes twinkle with glee. For more on breastfeeding and lactation content, head on over to my website where my course is. And for courses and books from Rachel, you can find everything in the links below. So here's the bloopers.
Oh,
so wait,
okay.
Let me just go. There are 3 papers. How they
said that.
Okay, I was just right. That's fine. We won't even talk about that because I'm going to get through. I've told that we're going to do a synopsis. Right, I'm cutting this. Jesus, I bet I'm not. I'm putting it as bloopers.
Please don't.
Just to show the real truth of what goes on in this podcast. I'm organised. I've got bloody notes.
Professional.
Highlighted, different colours. You should see these notes, man. Oh, God, I have revised this as well a lot because it's a lot.
I've got the questions, and then you ask the question, I get told off.
Well, just stick to the right order of the questions, then you'll be fine, won't you?
I thought I was.
This one before.
Right, so